if it's my choice, I just as soon have pizza and visit. You know. This symbol is known to many as the peace symbol, but it was designed in 1958 by a guy named Gerald Holton, and it was designed to be a logo for the campaign for nuclear disarmament, and that was in England or Britain. It was designed to be a flag symbol, which is one of the ways ships used to communicate with flag symbols. Designed to be the letter N for nuclear and the letter D for nuclear disarmament. Next slide. And I couldn't get just one, but here's the N, the two parts that go down, and here's the D, one up and one down. And that's how he came up with this. A close associate of Martin Luther King's went over to England to participate in their marches and their rallies, and he brought it back, and then it was used in civil rights marches here in the United States, and later in Vietnam War protests. And then it spread throughout the U.S. and the world, and now it's renowned to be the peace symbol. Today, besides that peace symbol, it represents a broken cross, the defeat of Christianity. So, and that's the signal, that sign actually dates back to the Middle Ages, where it was called the witch's foot or the crow's foot. And it was the same sign without the circle. So all this guy did was put that in a circle, and he said he originated it. But, you know, he took something that was already there, and it represented a broken cross turned upside down, and they used it in the Middle Ages to represent people who were opposed to Christianity. So it was like an evil symbol, you know, a pagan symbol. The next one, next slide. This is a representative of the flag, and all the black should be blue, of Israel. And in the middle is what's called the Star of David. Now the Star of David was a symbol that now almost everybody recognizes as belonging to Israel or Judaism. However, it was used by ungodly groups before the Jews got it, before David got it, before Solomon got it. And it's used today as an occult symbol with magical powers. But God used it first. I don't know if you remember or not, but one time here I spoke on snowflakes and water molecules and how they're six-pointed and six-sided. God did that. So this particular symbol didn't come from witchcraft, it came from God. He used it first. Next one. Now this is it's called a Latin cross also, but it's the symbol that kind of represents the Christian cross. And it's recognized around the world as being that. But many believe the cross was used long before the Messiah died on it. If you'd have been like me back in 1972, I'm dating myself, I wrote into the Worldwide Church of God or Ambassador College, and I got a letter back. And I asked about the origin of the cross. And it said that it was actually a pagan origin. And they quoted in the letter from a book called The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop, which was a book which was touted by the Worldwide Church of God and others, and he's supposed to be this great historian. And it says that that which is now called the Christian cross was originally no Christian emblem at all, but the mystic Tau, T-A-U, of the Chaldeans and the Egyptians, the true origin form of the letter T, the initial of the name of Tammuz. And so that Tau was put on infants' foreheads, and other people who were brought into their mystic circle, they used it as a sacred symbol, kind of like the way the Catholics do today, that they keep making that sign all the time. And basically, he said that there was hardly a pagan tribe where the cross was not found. Well, there's hardly a pagan tribe or any civilization that doesn't use geometric symbols, crosses, squares, even the swastika, as decoration as much as anything, not to worship necessarily, but some of them would worship them. And it said that there was no mention of the cross or the sign of the cross anywhere in the Bible. God's true saints never used such signs and symbols. Well, I believed that for a long time, but now I don't believe that. I believe he was wrong, and his conclusions were wrong about the cross. The last letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the letter Tav. And I've got another slide, 5. This is how the Tav evolved. It started out like a cross, got to kind of be an X, then this, and then this is how it looks today. But it started out looking like a cross. And actually most of the ancient writings have it kind of tilted a little bit, rather than straight up and down. But that's the ancient Tav. So what do you think that came from? I don't think it came from witchcraft to be used by the Hebrew alphabet, the language. There's a word that means sign, next one, and it is also called Tav, the way it's pronounced. But it's a T, or Tav, with a cross, you can see up there. That's kind of the way most people write the ancient Tav. And then a Vav, which is a nail. And it's the word Tav, and it means a secured mark. It's a secured sign. If you want, the secured cross. Okay? And I've told you before about the Aleph and the Tav, which is the next slide, Adam. The Aleph and the Tav, there is the Tav, and it's an Aleph is strength, and the Tav can mean cross or sign, so it's the strength of the cross, a direct reference to our Messiah. Now, the ancient Tav was in that form of a cross, and for centuries throughout history, it was the sign of God to God's people. One Jewish author wrote that Tav marks the spot. If the ancient Israelites would have been pirates, they would have put a Tav where the treasure was, not an X. But instead they owned herds. So guess what they did? They marked the letter Tav on their animals so they'd know who they belonged to. The ancient Tav was carved in a stone 300 years before Moses in Egypt. 300 years before Moses got there in Egypt. So Tav has been around for a long, long time, and it looks like a cross. Now, the ancient Hebrew scholars taught that the Tav was a sign of God, and it was a Jewish sign for centuries. The only reason it kind of went out of vogue for the Israelites, or the Hebrews, or the Jews, was because the Christians adopted it. And they didn't, we're not those people. So they kind of stopped using it. So I want to read from you from Ezekiel, Ezekiel chapter 9, verses 4 through 6. It says, "And the Lord said unto them, Go to the midst of the city, to the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And to the others he said in my hearing, Go ye therefore after him through the city, and smite. Let not your eyes spare, neither have ye pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man who has upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the temple." So we've got a mark that the Jews believed that when they read the Old Hebrew, that was the tav, was the mark that was put on their foreheads for these men. And this was going to be the sign of God. So it talks about the 144,000 servants are going to receive a seal of the living God on their foreheads to protect them. Well, if you were a Jewish believer in the book of Revelation, you would say that's going to be the same tav that God put on them back there in Ezekiel. So, the letter tav has been with us for a long time. The Essenes, they were at one of the places where Qumran, the famous Dead Sea Scrolls were found there. They baptized their converts, and when they did, they marked their heads with a tav, their foreheads, put a little tav up there, just like the Catholics do today. When they baptize an infant, they put a little mark on there. They then considered that person would be part of the faithful remnant that would be spared the coming wrath of God's day. So they kind of believed that mark was going to save them. Now, many churches today use the sign of the cross. They put it on their steeples, and they use it in different contexts. I think the Catholics kind of get really carried away, and it's almost a symbol that they revere rather than standing for just a cross that Christ was crucified on. The word cross in English is not in the Old Testament when it's translated. But it was used by the Jews back then. But we don't get that because they used the letter tav to mean that. And so we don't see that it says cross. Speaking of the cross that our Messiah died on, which cross? Got number 8. Here's basically 4 types of crosses. And going a little bit back, 10 years later, 1982, an article was in the Bible Advocate, and it was entitled The Method of Crucifixion, written by a guy named Jerry Griffin. And in it he states that there's 4 possible types of crosses. One is a stake, one is what's called an X or St. Andrew's cross. You'll find that X flattened out a little bit on the Scottish flag. Big, taking up the whole flag. The tau, which is like our capital T, and the Latin cross, which is assumed to be like the Christian cross that most Protestants use today. So the first type, the upright post, sometimes is referred to as a torture stake. Victims were either tied or they were impaled on this stake. Most of the time they were either dead or beheaded when they were put up there. It was a method of execution rather than a method of torture. So as a immediate sign, you can kind of say they weren't trying to execute our Savior. They wanted him to suffer up there. So it probably wasn't just a stake. The second type of a cross looked like an X. It's also the Greek letter chi, and it's the first letter of, and I can't pronounce the word, but whatever it is, for Christos or Christ in Greek. And we still use that Greek X to stand for Christ today. Hence the word Xmas instead of Christmas. They put that X there to stand for Christ. So both the early tav, the T, slanted T, and the X, the Greek chi, were used in what's called the Talmud, early writings by the Jews, and the early church. Both were used in the margins of the scrolls of the Isaiah scroll. They used those margins to put those, either the tav or the chi in, to mark the messianic portions of those scrolls. So they knew they applied to the Messiah. So we use the Hebrew tav today through the letter chi as a mark when we require to sign something. My wife, who can't move her hands very well at all, signs her name with an X when she signs. You know, not her name, but it's the best she can do. So she signs with that mark. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Planet of the Apes. There are actually 2 of them. One in 1968 with Charlton Heston, and then a follow-up in 2001 by Mark Wahlberg, and both of them had that X as what they had was scarecrows up there to scare the men away from it so they wouldn't bother it, but they crucified scarecrows, I guess. they put them up on that X. Basically, I rule out that as a method of crucifixion of our Messiah, because it says in Mark 27, verse 38, that they put a sign above his head. Well, you can't do that with an X. Not too well. So, also there are skeleton remains found near Jerusalem that both heels had the same nail through them, and they buried them that way. So they know that one nail was used in their crucifixions, not two spread out like that X. So the third type looks like our capital T. Again, just as the X, if they did it right and his arms were on the out part of the T, there's nothing above his head to put a sign on. So that appears to not be probably the way it was done. And the fourth one is our traditional Christian cross, sometimes called the Latin cross. And then I want to back up and start by telling you that the Roman style of crucifixion, they kind of went through the same procedure almost every time. The person was beaten. Then they were forced to carry a crossbeam. Not the whole cross, but just the crossbeam. The stake, the upright part, was already out there wherever they were going to crucify him. And they had to carry the crossbeam out to where that stake was. And then he was placed on his back with his arms stretched out on that crossbeam. And they nailed or tied his arms on that crossbeam. Then they lifted him up. If they nailed him, medical science will tell you they probably nailed him right here. Because to put it in the hand, the weight of his body would have ripped out the nails, and it would not have stayed up like that. But if they put it there, it's the junction of the bones, and it could hold. So that's probably kind of the wrist area here, between the wrist and the arm, is where the nail went. Then the crossbeam was lifted up. The soldiers lifted it up, and they attached it to the vertical post. Basically, the knees were bent off to the side, so the two feet were kind of one on top of the other, and that's how they drove the nail in, like that. Now, most of them, people on the cross that they crucified, they put a wooden plank on the stake to support the victim's pelvis. And they did that so that he could kind of raise up on that and catch a breath of air, because that medically made it very hard to breathe hanging like that. And so they did that not to help him out, but to prolong his agony. It was a form of torture, which was what was basically the Roman crucifixion, was a form of torture. Not necessarily that imminent death, let's behead you and stick you on a pole. So that wooden plank was there not to help you. That's why you can read that the Romans, they broke their legs to make death hurry up. Once they broke their legs, death was imminent. It was going to follow very quickly after that, because they couldn't get up and breathe. There's much more medical detail I could tell you, but I'm going to kind of skip over that. It's not important to know that he had a hard time breathing, had to lift up. Blood was flowing down. It was not circulating properly. There are basically two things I want you to take away from what I told you today. And to me, they're the most important things. One is, whatever symbol you want to talk about, the peace symbol, the Star of David, even the cross, God made it first. God had everything first. He created everything. It says in Genesis 1:1, God created the heavens and the earth. That's a euphemism for everything. Nothing was left out. And you can go back and trace all these things that are supposed to be pagan. I've got articles and articles on pagan symbols, but almost every one of them you can trace back to something godly that it started out, but man has polluted it. And then after man pollutes it, we call it evil and we don't want to use it anymore. The next thing is the cross symbol was used by the Hebrews and the other cultures long before our Savior died on it. So whether he was crucified on a tree, it's mentioned in Acts 5:30 and a couple other places, or on a stake, as the Greek word staros is used 28 times in the New Testament, a stake, or the letter T, or the shape of a stake with a crossbeam. However that happened is not the most important issue. The most important issue is that he died for us. And he died and he paid that penalty. Now we don't have to. So is it important what it looked like that they crucified him on? Well, some people would say, yeah, we want to know. And I want to know. You know, if I can know, I'd like to know. I like to know those things. But it's not deadly important. It doesn't, I don't have to know for my salvation what he was actually crucified on. But I believe with the research I've done that it was probably something like the last one, some kind of cross like that. And I could not find a picture, an image of, they have all kinds of them on the internet, but I couldn't find one with the knees bent the right way and everything. Couldn't find one. So I didn't get one of those. I wanted to put one up there, but I couldn't do it. Most of them have images that I don't agree with, of somebody on a cross that's supposed to be Christ. I don't think so. They break a lot of what I believe is the picture that they picture Christ with today, and they're wrong as far as I'm concerned. But I couldn't find one with the knees bent the right way and everything, or the little piece of wood that they put underneath the pelvis and the nails put in the right way and stuff like that. Just, you can't find one. Everybody wants to interpret it their way. I don't believe that that's necessarily the truth. But going back, the important thing is that he died for us. And I don't think I will embellish the cross symbol just because of partly of habit and partly because I don't think that's what we should be worshiping. Figuring out that, you know, oh, we got to make the sign of the cross and kneel at the cross or something like that. We should be worshiping our Savior for what he did for us. So let's bow our heads. Father, we thank you for giving us your word, for telling us the things we need to know, Father. Help us to learn what you want us to know, and help us to go forward studying your words as you have admonished that other people who do well to search the Scriptures daily, Father, to find out what it is you want us to understand. We ask you now to be with us, to fill our hearts with your word, and go with us as we go home, as we spend the rest of this Sabbath day, Father, pondering about how you would like us to live and what you would like us to do. And we ask all this in Yeshua's name. Amen.